One day, a gate to hell suddenly appeared in the sky. From it emerged terrifying calamities that overwhelmed humanity with unimaginable power. As the monsters rampaged across the world, mankind seemed destined for extinction. But when faced with despair, humanity awakened. People began gaining levels and skills, giving them the power to fight back against the calamities. Since then, the world has changed. A person's value was now determined by their level and abilities. Among all humanity, 10 individuals stood above everyone else. They were praised, respected, and worshipped as the strongest heroes in existence. They were known as the Numbers. The heroes who once saved the world had become humanity's greatest hope. One day, a blonde-haired man announced that the Numbers were searching for people worthy enough to fight alongside them. The announcement was displayed on a massive screen in the middle of the city. A brown-haired boy stopped and looked up at it. He quietly watched the screen as he thought about the Numbers, the heroes who had once saved the world. For a brief moment, he simply stood there and stared at the massive display. His name was Kuya Kamakami. And this guy right here is our main protagonist. Like countless others, Kuya had once been saved by the Numbers. Because of that, he grew up dreaming of joining them someday and protecting people from calamities. That was the dream he held onto as a child. But reality was far crueler. Nearby, one person proudly announced that they had finally reached level 100. Another complained about still being stuck in the level 90s. In a world where strength could be measured so clearly, the strong were respected more than ever. Meanwhile, the weak were looked down upon. And for Kuya, who had been stuck at level 8 for 6 whole years, it felt as if the world itself was telling him that he didn't deserve to exist. In a world where everyone possessed powers, he was the only person who had never awakened. Suddenly, alarms echoed throughout the city. A calamity warning was broadcast everywhere. Some people grumbled because they were busy and found it annoying. Children started crying. Others checked their phones and complained that the detected location was probably wrong again. A little girl cried out for her mother. Her mother immediately pulled her into a hug and reassured her that the Numbers would come and save them. Then suddenly, the space above them cracked open. A monster clawed its way into the city. Panic spread instantly as people ran for their lives. But the mother and daughter froze in fear. The moment Kuya saw them, he turned around and sprinted forward without hesitation. He placed himself between the monster and the two civilians as the towering creature loomed over him. His entire body trembled with fear. The monster let out a deafening roar. At that moment, Kuya wished more than anything that he had power. Then, in an instant, a blonde-haired man appeared and kicked the monster away. Kuya's eyes widened in shock. He recognized the man immediately. It was Inui, Seika Inui, one of the Numbers, the man known as the strongest in the world, and the person Kuya admired more than anyone else. 6 years ago, a monster known as a special grade calamity appeared. Even awakened humans were no match for it. Countless people lost their lives. At the time, Kuya was only 11 years old. Covered in blood, he sat helplessly among piles of corpses. Most of what happened that day had become a blur in his memory, but one memory remained crystal clear. The Numbers fought a desperate battle against the calamity with their lives on the line. Inui personally faced the monster in combat, and just when he finally cornered it, the monster noticed something. It saw Kuya, and immediately shifted its attention toward him. That was where Kuya's memory ended. When he regained consciousness, Inui was holding him tightly and assuring him that he was safe now. That was the moment Kuya realized that Inui himself had saved him. A scream suddenly pulled Kuya back to reality. A crowd had gathered around Inui in excitement after recognizing him as one of the Numbers. Kuya stood there completely stunned. Until one of the fangirls shoved him aside. Only then did he realize just how overwhelmingly popular Inui truly was. There were still so many things he wanted to tell him, and chances like this might never come again. Gathering his courage, Kuya tightly gripped his notebook labeled "Things to Do to Become One of the Numbers." Then he called out to Inui. Inui turned around. Kuya nervously asked if he remembered the boy he had saved 6 years ago. He confessed that ever since that day, he had wanted to become as strong as him. He explained that he had tried his hardest all these years, but no matter what he did, his level and skills never improved the way he wanted them to. Desperately, Kuya asked what he needed to do to become one of the Numbers. Inui remained silent. Suddenly, one of the fans yelled at Kuya to move already and shoved him onto the ground. Groaning in pain, Kuya slowly sat back up. Then a young girl suddenly called out, "Big brother!" Kuya immediately recognized her. She was the little girl from earlier. Relieved that she was safe, he looked toward her, but she ran straight past him and thanked Inui for saving her instead. Kuya quietly lowered his eyes. Then he slowly stood back up and left, because he still had to go to school. A live news report was being broadcast from Shibuya. The reporter explained that although a calamity warning had appeared during one of the busiest hours of the day, a nearby subjugation team had responded immediately. She proudly announced that Seika Inui of the Numbers had successfully defeated the beast. Praising his swift actions, she declared that peace had once again been protected in Shibuya. Inui stated that the mission of the Numbers was to ensure that the tragedy from 6 years ago would never happen again. He declared that they would continue fighting with their lives on the line to uphold that duty. The reporter asked if he was referring to the special grade Calamity incident, the disaster that caused the highest number of casualties in history. Inui confirmed it. He stated that they had paid a terrible price during that battle and lost many of their fellow Numbers. Kuya silently watched the broadcast from the giant screen. Excitedly, the reporter pointed out that Inui was the man who defeated the Calamity and became a living legend. The crowd around him erupted into cheers. Inui looked like he wanted to say something, as if he was about to deny it, but when he saw the smiles and admiration on his fans' faces, he simply smiled back and waved at the crowd instead. Meanwhile, Kuya continued walking toward school. Then suddenly, someone grabbed him from behind. A blonde-haired boy wrapped an arm around Kuya's shoulders while calling him Hachiko. Startled, Kuya immediately recognized him. It was Tanba. Kuya awkwardly stammered Tanba's name. Without warning, one of Tanba's friends kicked Kuya hard in the stomach. The guy shouted that a little pipsqueak like Kuya had no right speaking casually to someone like Tanba. The three bullies looked down on him with mocking smiles. One of Tanba's lackeys proudly explained that Tanba was already considered a candidate for the next generation of the Numbers, a true rising star. He sneered that a pathetic level 8 loser like Hachiko shouldn't be talking to him like they were equals. Tanba casually told them to stop before people misunderstood the situation. Noticing the stares from nearby pedestrians, he explained that they were just classmates. Ryoji Tanba was the same age as Kuya. But unlike him, Tanba was a genius who constantly broke records. The difference between them was overwhelming. Then Tanba casually mentioned that he and the others were thinking about going bowling. Kuya awkwardly replied that he couldn't skip school. The group immediately burst into laughter. They mocked him for thinking he had actually been invited. One of them called him embarrassing. Tanba leaned closer and casually told Kuya to lend him some cash since he was a little short at the moment. Kuya pointed out that Tanba never paid him back, and besides, Tanba came from a rich family anyway. Tanba frowned slightly and said he didn't understand. Then he suddenly shouted that spending Koya's money was the most fun part. He punched Koya in the face and stole his wallet. After seeing the tiny amount of money inside, Tanba clicked his tongue and called him a cheapskate. Once he took the cash, he tossed the empty wallet away and told Kuya he should have handed it over from the beginning. Kuya silently cursed them in his head. Meanwhile, the group walked away while talking about how much money the Numbers probably earned. One of them claimed that reaching the top meant gaining influence equal to a president. Tanba admitted that he desperately wanted to become one of the Numbers because they probably had everything: money, women, and luxury. The moment Kuya heard that, his eyes widened. Quietly, he muttered that they were wrong. The group stopped and turned toward him. Then Kuya suddenly shouted at them that they were wrong. He grabbed Tanba by the shoulders and yelled that the Numbers were not vulgar people like them, so they had no right mocking them. Kuya declared that no matter how talented Tanba was, someone like him could never become one of the Numbers. Naturally, those words pissed Tanba off. Turning toward his friends, Tanba announced that bowling was cancelled. Instead, he decided to teach Kuya a lesson. Inside an abandoned building, the group surrounded Kuya. Tanba punched him and demanded to know who gave him the right to talk back. Then he revealed his level. A status window appeared before Kuya's eyes. It displayed the name Ryoji Tanba, level 2500. Skill: Pocket. Tanba reminded Kuya that he could crush a weakling like him instantly. Then he proudly announced that he would show him his ultimate skill: Pocket. Kuya stared in shock as a giant dark fish-like creature materialized behind Tanba. Tanba explained that his skill allowed him to store anything inside his pocket, claim it as his own, and summon it whenever he wanted, even calamities. He brought up Kauya's earlier statement about him never becoming one of the numbers. Then he asked if Kuya could still talk big after seeing this monster. The Calamity immediately charged toward Kuya. The others laughed at him. Tanba mockingly told him to run, otherwise he would get eaten alive. Kuya stumbled and crashed face first onto the ground. The Calamity roared violently before biting directly into his leg. With terrifying force, it slammed him into the ground. A violent explosion of dust and purple energy erupted outward. One of the guys nervously muttered, "Oh, whoopsie." Blood spread across the floor. Kuya looked down in horror at his severed leg. Then he screamed in agony. One of the bullies panicked and asked if Kuya was seriously about to die. Tanba calmly replied that if the thorium we saw him or they called an ambulance now, someone with a healing skill could still save him. He suggested pretending they had simply discovered a weak civilian being attacked by a Calamity. After all, saving Kuya would probably improve his reputation even more. Standing over Koya's broken body, Tanba mockingly asked if he wanted to be saved. Then he offered him a deal. He said he would save Kuya, only if Kuya agreed to become his dog for the rest of his life. Kuya could do nothing but lie there helplessly, while Tanba continued calling him worthless. Tears formed in Koya's eyes as he wondered why this was happening to him. Then Tanba accidentally stepped on something. It was Kuya's notebook. He picked it up and showed it to the others. Reading through it, he found a note that said, "Do 300 push-ups and sit-ups every day." Tanba laughed and called Kuya a desperate, try hard. The others mocked how hard Kuya worked, despite never increasing his level even once. Tanba sneered that being useless must really suck. Then he told Kuya to accept reality already. Tanba declared that someone without skills or levels could never become one of the numbers. And once again, he called Kuya worthless. Tears streamed down Koya's face. He could not understand why this was happening to him, why people like Tanba were blessed with power, while he had absolutely nothing. His body slowly grew colder. He wondered if this was really where he was going to die. And faced with such a miserable ending, Kuya quietly wondered what the point of his life had even been. Suddenly, a towering figure made of blazing red flames appeared behind the group. It declared that all of this was foolish. Kuya stared blankly at it. His vision was blurry. Then he noticed something strange. The world around him had completely stopped moving. For a moment, Kuya wondered if he had already died. The voice sounded disgusted. It could not believe a human would actually die from something so pathetic. Kuya weakly asked, who was there? The flaming entity introduced itself as Mugen. Then it asked Kuya if he had forgotten what happened 6 years ago. Kuya's eyes widened in shock, because this monster was the very same special grade Calamity that Inui supposedly defeated back then. Mugen scoffed at the idea. It corrected Kuya and revealed the truth. It had never been defeated at all. Instead, it had been living inside Kuya this entire time. Kuya could not understand what it meant. Mugen explained that 6 years ago, after exhausting nearly all of its energy, it attempted to possess the body of the brat nearby. That brat had been Kuya. But instead of taking over his body, Mugen itself ended up being absorbed into Kuya instead. Mugen complained that watching Kuya's pathetic insect-like life for 6 straight years had been unbearably boring. It spent all that time asleep, unable to even take control of his body. Only now, after Kuya had nearly died, was it finally able to emerge again. Mugen coldly told Kuya that he was going to die. Pain covered Koya's face. Mugen mocked his miserable life. Nobody acknowledged him. Nobody expected anything from him. Everyone treated him like an insect. Then Mugen asked Kuya if he knew why. It declared that it was because Kuya was weak. Kuya gritted his teeth in frustration. Mugen asked if power was truly what Kuya desired. Then, as a final gift before death, it offered him a taste of power so he could at least die satisfied. But Kuya rejected that idea, because the power he truly wanted was power he could use to protect others, just like how Inui protected him back then. That was the kind of strength he had always admired. That was the power he truly wanted. Suddenly, Kuya's eyes glowed bright red. Violent energy began swirling around him. A terrifying force exploded from his body. Tanba and the others froze in shock. Then suddenly, The Calamity Tanba had summoned collapsed, dead on the spot. Koya's body slowly rose back to its feet, but it was no longer Koya controlling it. Mugen had taken over, and Mugen laughed with satisfaction after finally obtaining a human body again. Then it asked Kuya something. Had he ever wondered why his level never increased no matter how hard he trained? Mugen raised a fist and shattered Koya's status screen with a single punch. The broken screen cracked apart like glass. Then Mugen revealed the truth. Koya's status had been facing the wrong direction this entire time. An infinity symbol suddenly glowed brightly above Koya's body. Sinister red energy crackled violently around him as overwhelming power burst outward. Mugen truly reveled in the sensation of possessing a human body once again. Tanba wondered what exactly was wrong with Kuya. One of his lackeys questioned whether Kuya was somehow still alive because his life force resembled that of a cockroach. Mugen casually commented that just as he expected, they were weak. Cracking his claw-like fingers, he activated his skill. The two lackeys burst into laughter because they assumed he had completely lost his mind. However, Tanba remained deadly serious. Mugen told those small fries to do their absolute best not to die instantly. Meanwhile, inside a high-rise building within the city, someone announced that he had returned. Seika Inui stepped into his office. His secretary welcomed him back and reported that there had been 0 casualties, just as expected. Inui agreed and remarked that it was fortunate the Calamity had appeared nearby. He reflected on how unpredictable Calamity threats could be and emphasized that they always needed to remain vigilant. Then Kuya suddenly crossed his mind. His secretary asked whether something was wrong. Inui shared that a kid had spoken to him earlier, and he eventually realized that it was the same child he had saved during the Calamity incident 6 years ago. He admitted that he had done something terrible. He regretted not recognizing Koya sooner. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure filled the room. Inui immediately asked what that presence was. Then he looked out the window. He could feel that the power outside was equal to theirs, or possibly even stronger. In complete disbelief, he wondered whether it was Calamity-class power. Back at the abandoned building, one of Tanba's friends was becoming increasingly irritated with Koya. He felt deeply offended after being called a small fry. The man immediately charged toward him. He swore that he would kill Kuya himself. However, the blazing energy gathered in his hand suddenly dispersed before it could even touch Koya. Then Kuya twisted the man's arm so violently that the bones shattered instantly. When the man collapsed onto the floor, his body was grotesquely twisted, as though someone had wrung him out like a towel. Lost in a manic state, Mugen declared that the feeling of crushing bones was absolutely irresistible. He added that it had already been 6 years since he last experienced it. Sweat dripped down Tanba's face as he questioned whether the person standing before him was really Koya anymore. Meanwhile, the other lackey remained arrogant. So he gathered his energy and attacked while shouting that Kuya was still the truly useless one. He unleashed a technique called Wig Whip, sending thorn-covered glowing green vines lashing violently toward Koya. The vines wrapped tightly around Koya's body. The man believed he had successfully captured him, so he became completely confused when the vines suddenly disappeared and Koya effortlessly sidestepped away. Then Koya raised his fingers. With a simple flick to the man's forehead, he launched him away while blood sprayed through the air. The impact sent the man flying backward violently as blood burst everywhere. Mugen casually declared that all of this was boring. He wanted something far more exciting instead. Suddenly, Mugen sensed something approaching. A wide grin slowly spread across his face after realizing that a big one had finally arrived. Tanba immediately activated his technique Pocket. Purple portals of energy opened all around him. Tanba shouted at Kuya not to get carried away and cursed him as a bastard. Then he unleashed countless daggers toward him at incredible speed. However, Mugen looked disappointed. He effortlessly shattered every projectile as he realized that the presence he sensed was not Tanba at all. Tanba stared in complete shock. Then, in a single instant, a powerful strike slammed directly into him. His body crashed violently into the wall. Several of his teeth flew out before he completely lost consciousness. Mugen continued staring ahead, clearly expecting someone else to arrive. Standing before him was a Calamity with writhing tentacles covering its face. Mugen grinned. He asked whether it had come to celebrate his revival before mockingly calling it Big Guy. Mugen already knew that this weak Calamity did not possess a will of its own, so he wondered whether it had simply been drawn there by sensing his power. Meanwhile, Tanba stared at the scene in complete confusion while blood dripped from his nose. He could not believe that just as Kuya suddenly became monstrously strong, another terrifying Calamity had appeared as well. At that point, he genuinely wondered whether he was dreaming. Mugen became excited and declared that it was finally time for some warm-up exercises. Inside his own mind, Koya questioned what exactly that power was. He slowly stared down at his own hands. Then he wondered whether he was even truly alive anymore, because only moments earlier, his body had felt freezing cold. Mugen stood before the gigantic Calamity and casually asked the kid whether he was still alive. With a sinister smirk spreading across his face, he asked Kuya once again if he was truly alive. Then Mugen slowly began walking forward while continuing to converse with him. A wicked smile appeared across his face as he told Kuya to enjoy the show from the best seat in the house. Power surged violently through his body, causing the ground itself to crack apart beneath him. Kuya questioned what Mugen meant and demanded to know what exactly he planned to do. Standing directly before the massive tentacled Calamity, Mugen declared that his intentions should already be obvious. Then he brought up the burning incident from 6 years ago. Kuya suddenly remembered the horrifying sight of Mugen standing amidst a ruined city, while corpses covered the streets everywhere. Horrified, Kuya wondered whether that nightmare was about to happen all over again. Mugen declared that he would kill the Calamity first, and after that, he would resume slaughtering the humans. However, something suddenly made his eyes widen in surprise. Just thinking about the disaster from 6 years ago continuing once again, there was no way Kuya would allow that to happen. He desperately demanded his body back. Suddenly, violent energy surged throughout the body, and Kuya screamed in agony. Mugen roared furiously while demanding to know what Kuya had done. Without wasting another second, Kuya forcefully reclaimed control of his body. Mugen stood there completely dumbfounded. Meanwhile, Kuya himself could barely believe that he had actually returned. The giant Calamity loomed directly above him as Mugen demanded to know what exactly he had done. Mugen warned him that he was going to die. He added that if Kuya wanted to avoid that fate, then he needed to switch places with him again immediately. At that exact instant, the Calamity's attack nearly struck him. Barely managing to dodge, Kuya looked upward in confusion. Then he noticed a blade already lodged deep inside the Calamity's body, so he immediately rushed forward and drove it in even further. The giant tentacles attacked relentlessly from every direction, but Kuya moved at incredible speed while dodging every single strike. Mugen scoffed after realizing that Kuya was not only controlling the body again, but was also using Mugen's power at the same time. Kuya could feel his body moving almost on instinct. At the same time, the Calamity's attack suddenly looked unbelievably slow to him. Then, with a powerful punch, Kuya slammed his fist directly into the giant creature. At that moment, he realized that he could actually do this. Until one of the tentacles suddenly wrapped around his leg. Caught completely off guard, Kuya was instantly yanked away. The Calamity held him upside down in the air, while its glowing yellow eyes stared directly at him. Struggling desperately, Kuya told himself to stay focused. He forced himself to feel the power flowing through him. Then, a status window suddenly appeared before his eyes, revealing his skill, Unrestricted Awakening. At the same time, his level changed from 8 into an infinity symbol. While suspended in midair, Kuya began channeling that overwhelming power. Suddenly, beams of light erupted from inside the Calamity's body itself. A massive explosion erupted outward. The blast destroyed most of the building. When everything settled, Kuya stood amidst the remains of the defeated Calamity. Nearby, Tanba groaned painfully while lying across piles of broken debris. Kuya could not believe that the entire building had practically been blown apart. Meanwhile, Mugen wondered what exactly was wrong with him. That moment marked Kuya's true encounter with Mugen, and that encounter would eventually invite countless future battles into his life. At the time, however, Kuya had absolutely no idea about any of that. Elsewhere, a young man calmly sat atop the head of a gigantic slain beast while quietly muttering that everything was boring. The morning news reported that a Calamity had appeared inside an abandoned building within the city the previous day. The broadcast explained that the Metropolitan Police and the Calamity Countermeasures headquarters were currently investigating the incident. It was also announced that the numbers themselves would participate in the investigation. Meanwhile, huge crowds had already gathered near the scene in hopes of catching a glimpse of the numbers. Watching the news from inside his room, Kuya muttered that things had turned into a massive mess. He remembered everything that happened the day before. He had caused the Calamity to explode and practically destroyed the entire building in the process. Kuya slowly inspected his hand. Then he checked his status window. His level had returned to level 8, yet his body no longer felt completely like his own. It felt as though overwhelming power was constantly overflowing inside him. Suddenly, Kayano noticed his reflection in the mirror and froze in shock. There were now red highlights mixed into his hair. He looked like some delinquent and immediately complained that he hated it. At that moment, he realized that everything that happened yesterday had truly been real. Then his eyes landed on the massive scar across his leg, causing his face to instantly turn pale. At that exact moment, Mugen's voice echoed in his mind, telling him that if he wanted to keep dreaming, then he should simply go back to sleep already. Suddenly, dark energy began swirling all around Koya. Confused, he looked around and asked where exactly he was. Mugen coldly called him insolent. Then he declared that Koya now stood before the Great Lord Mugen himself. Mugen remarked that it was unbelievable for a mere human to interfere with him, and stated that Koya should consider it an honor. Koya glared directly at him. After all, this was the special grade Calamity Mugen, the same monster who plunged the world into terror 6 years ago. Koya scolded him for doing whatever he wanted inside a human body. Since Mugen was supposed to be a Calamity, Koya demanded to know why he was doing something like this in the first place. Mugen only grinned in response, then he repeated the question while releasing black mist toward Koya. Memories of people screaming and desperately fleeing through chaos suddenly resurfaced. Amidst the collapsing rubble and destruction, Mugen stood tall like a nightmare itself. Koya's eyes widened in horror. He collapsed onto his knees while breathing heavily. As Mugen's thoughts poured directly into his mind, Koya realized something terrifying. Mugen only understood destruction, slaughter, and an endless urge to consume absolutely everything. Even so, Koya declared that he would never allow Mugen to do whatever he wanted. He challenged Mugen directly, and pointed out that Mugen could not even leave his body anyway. Mugen admitted that Koya was correct. He himself did not understand how he had become trapped inside someone like Koya. Then a massive grin slowly spread across Mugen's face. He warned Koya that once he died, the body would fully become his. Koya stared back at him with determination while dark energy endlessly swirled around them. Chuckling to himself, Mugen remarked that the day was not far away anymore. Koya immediately demanded to know what he meant by that. Mugen asked why Koya thought the giant Calamity from yesterday had appeared in the first place. He revealed that calamities were naturally flocking toward Koya like moths drawn toward a flame. Mugen described a future filled with endless screams, chaos, and destruction. According to him, the world itself would eventually become a living hell. Koya realized that calamities were now gathering around him. Mugen casually stated that the weak calamities from before posed no challenge for him at all. However, sooner or later, Koya would inevitably be killed by one of them. Mugen eagerly looked forward to the day he could finally take complete control over Koya's body, but until that day arrived, Koya would have no choice but to continue fighting alone. Later, a train sped through a dark tunnel. Koya sat quietly inside one of the train cars while thinking about how he was supposed to keep fighting. He knew there was no way he could continue relying on the power of a calamity forever. Still, he also understood that this was not a problem he could solve alone anymore. This was no longer just his personal issue. It had become a threat to all of humanity itself, and in Koya's mind, there was only one person capable of solving something like this. Seika Inui. Koya pinned the location of the Numbers Association on his phone. He felt certain that if he honestly explained everything, Inui would help him. Eventually, he got off the train at the Numbers Association station. The moment Koya stepped onto the platform, a group of delinquents immediately noticed him and started calling him Hachiko. They mocked him while asking what a worthless dog like him was doing there. Koya remained silent. One of the bullies remarked that Koya was acting pretty cold toward them now. Another suggested that they should all have a little fun together instead. Koya quickly apologized and explained that he was in a hurry. He politely asked whether they could do this another time instead. One of the delinquents scoffed and remarked that Tanba's little pet was suddenly talking awfully boldly. The leader declared that they needed to teach Koya a lesson for Tanba's sake. Throwing a heavy punch toward him, the man ordered Koya to quietly wag his tail like usual. Koya instinctively braced himself. However, when he felt absolutely nothing hit him, he slowly opened his eyes in confusion. Suddenly, the man screamed in agony while clutching his arm. The others immediately rushed toward Koya while demanding to know what he had just done. Koya panicked and stammered for them to stop. Instinctively, Koya thrust both of his hands forward, and one of the men was suddenly blasted directly onto the train tracks. Koya hurriedly apologized while asking whether he was all right, but out of nowhere, a calamity suddenly appeared beside the man on the tracks. It resembled a gigantic worm lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. The man froze in terror after realizing that a calamity had appeared. Meanwhile, Kuya immediately realized that Mugen had been telling the truth. The calamities really were gathering around him. The creature lunged toward the man, forcing Kuya to dive in and save him. The calamity's massive body slammed both of them back onto the platform. Kuya stared in disbelief at what he had just done. He wondered whether that had really been him moving just now. The calamity loomed menacingly above them. Kuya desperately wondered what he was supposed to do now. He honestly doubted whether he could even fight something like that. Nearby, a woman suddenly screamed in terror. There were even more calamities appearing throughout the station. At that moment, Mugen's words echoed throughout Kuya's mind. And Kuya immediately blamed himself for all of it. In his imagination, he saw humans being devoured by calamities all around him. He wondered what he was supposed to do anymore. All his life, he had wanted to save people, yet reality kept turning out to be the complete opposite. Then determination suddenly filled his eyes. It did not matter whether the power came from a calamity anymore. A worthless Hachiko like him could not afford to be picky. Whether it was power, granted by heaven, or power stolen from a calamity, Kuya chose to use it. He let out a loud scream as he activated that power. A status window appeared before him, displaying his skill. Infinite Awakening. His level no longer showed a number, and instead displayed an infinity symbol. This was his power now. Kuya charged forward. Then he threw a devastating punch toward the calamity that was about to devour the terrified woman. The woman stared at him in complete shock. Kuya had already made up his mind. If Mugen intended to take over his body, then he would simply use Mugen's power for himself instead. He continued punching through the calamities one after another. People watched in disbelief as the monsters' bodies were blown apart in midair. Meanwhile, Mugen noticed that Kuya had successfully drawn out his power once again. Eventually, the overwhelming energy finally settled down. The woman tearfully thanked Kuya for saving everyone. More survivors soon gathered around him, praising his strength while repeatedly thanking him over and over. Someone even shouted that Kuya looked just like one of the numbers themselves. Meanwhile, the two delinquents remained frozen on the ground in complete shock. However, Kuya himself remained deep in thought. He remembered being mocked his entire life as a worthless Hachiko. And now, he was determined to leave that identity behind forever. Most importantly, he was determined not to let Mugen take control of him. At the same time, inside a hospital within the city, Tanba repeatedly muttered the name Hachiko. Tanba gritted his teeth and swore that he would never forgive him. A nurse entered the room and informed him that he had a visitor. Annoyed, Tanba screamed at her, reminding her that he had already said not to let anyone inside. Inui immediately scolded him for speaking so rudely to someone taking care of him. Tanba replied that he was not impressed. However, the moment he heard Inui's voice, Tanba froze. He was shocked to see him and instantly became polite. Inui asked whether his injuries were all right after surviving such a disaster. He casually remarked that surviving a high-class calamity might actually make Tanba a lucky person. The woman standing beside Inui casually chewed gum, while Tanba recognized her as another member of the numbers. He wondered why such important people had suddenly come to visit him. Inui explained that they were currently investigating the person responsible for defeating the calamity. He told Tanba to speak up if he knew anything. Tanba froze the moment he heard the word defeated. It instantly reminded him of the way Kuya fought back then, and it made him furious. Tanba shouted at them to stop messing with him. He insisted that he was the one who killed the calamity. Then he desperately demanded that Inui allow him to join the numbers. Deep down, however, he refused to admit that Kuya had actually saved him. Instead, he kept convincing himself that he was the superior one. The woman's eyes faintly glowed as she casually popped her gum. Inui immediately noticed it. After a brief pause, Inui simply replied that he understood. Then, with a gentle smile, he told Tanba to focus on recovering first. He turned around to leave, but Tanba immediately sat up and shouted for them to wait. Desperately, he begged them not to leave and once again pleaded to be accepted into the numbers. Meanwhile, Inui and the woman walked through the hallway while talking about how Tanba was a complete dud. She remarked that he was trying way too hard to act tough when she could crush him effortlessly. Inui told her not to say that because Tanba was considered a rising star. She looked shocked after hearing that and commented that the world must truly be ending. Then, he brought up the other survivor. He hoped their teammate was having better luck there. The woman asked who had been sent to meet the other survivor. He replied that it was the fast-rising number 13. She looked surprised and even questioned whether that was really a good idea. Inui explained that if the opponent truly possessed a special grade ability, then they would need a ranker of an equal level to deal with them. Otherwise, the survivor would be completely overwhelmed. They were talking about a genius who was destined to become the strongest. It was Kei Kusanagi. The massive skyscraper stood at the very center of the city. Koya stared at it in complete awe the moment he saw it. It was the Numbers Association. Information regarding calamities from all across Japan was gathered there, while rankers from every region constantly visited the building. Rankers were warriors who made their living by subjugating calamities. This was also the headquarters of the Numbers, the 10 pillars who stood above all rankers, which meant that Inui, the strongest man alive, was inside this very place as well. Koya needed a way to deal with the approaching calamities, yet he still had no countermeasure against Mugen, the calamity living inside him. If Mugen ever completely took over his body, then Kuya would need someone capable of killing both him and Mugen together, and he believed that Inui was the only person who could accomplish that. With that determination in mind, Kuya stepped inside the building. A group of receptionists with completely identical faces greeted him and politely asked how they could help him. Caught off guard, Kuya wondered whether it was some kind of special ability or if they were actually clones. As he approached the counter, he requested a meeting with Inui. The receptionist politely informed him that Inui was currently away and asked whether he had an appointment. Kuya admitted that he did not. He explained that he simply hoped to somehow meet him directly. The receptionist then asked for his name and age. He introduced himself as Koya Kamikami, 17 years old. The receptionist looked surprised because it appeared that he did not have a skill registration on file. She pointed out that skill registration was mandatory for all awakened individuals. Intentionally avoiding registration would even be considered a crime. Kuya nervously stammered before admitting that his skill had simply never manifested until now. The receptionist finally understood the situation and instructed Koya to register his skill first. She also asked whether he wanted to register as a ranker at the same time. Kuya agreed, though he quickly became confused afterward. The receptionist directed him toward a machine and instructed him to place his hand on it. The machine would analyze his skill, and once that was complete, his registration process would be finished. Kuya immediately wanted to back out, but the receptionist offered to explain what being a ranker actually meant. Inside his mind, Mugen muttered that the place was unbelievably boring. He compared the people around them to grains of rice. At that moment, someone entered the building. It was Kei. A powerful aura surrounded him. Mugen immediately noticed his presence. Meanwhile, the receptionist continued explaining that registered rankers received rankings which changed depending on the calamities they defeated and the directives they completed for the association. She added that the top 10 rankers were known as the Numbers, individuals who possessed both immense honor and enormous wealth. She encouraged Kuya to work hard and someday become one of them. Then she began explaining several important rules. First, private disputes between rankers involving skills were strictly forbidden and would result in severe punishment. Kuya felt completely overwhelmed. He had only come there to ask for help regarding Mugen. Yet somehow he had suddenly become a ranker himself. He quickly snapped back to reality and reminded himself that this was not the time to feel happy about it. He wondered whether this was really okay since the process might expose Mugen's existence. Then the machine announced that the registration had been completed. The receptionist congratulated him on officially becoming a ranker. Kuya quietly sighed in relief. Then the receptionist showed him the results of his skill and rank evaluation. She found something strange. Kuya was registered as level 8, yet there was no skill listed under his profile at all. Secretly, Kuya felt relieved. Because if the machine had displayed something like Calamity or Mugen, then things would have instantly become a disaster. The receptionist informed him that they would need to investigate the issue further. Kuya quickly told her that it was completely fine. Suddenly, Kei appeared behind him and asked whether he was Koya Kamikami. Caught off guard, Koya turned around and wondered who exactly this person was. Blue energy gleamed inside Kei's eyes. He declared that he had high expectations for Koya. In the very next instant, an overwhelming burst of blue energy exploded outward. The attack tore straight through the table while the receptionist stumbled backward in shock. Koya instantly evaded the strike and reappeared behind Kei. Kei looked amused by his reaction. Meanwhile, Kuya was irritated. He could not believe that the floor itself had been gouged apart. He demanded to know what Kei thought he was doing. Kei simply wondered whether Kuya was truly the one. Everyone became tense. The commotion quickly gathered a crowd as people wondered whether a fight between rankers was about to break out. A group of receptionists immediately rushed over and warned them that duels between rankers were strictly forbidden. They ordered the two not to fight inside the association. Kei glared at them. The receptionist hid behind the counter while yelling that they would both be subjected to punishment if they continued. Meanwhile, Kuya simply observed Kei carefully. Sweat slowly rolled down his cheek. Kei noticed that Kuya had managed to dodge that attack, and because of that, he suspected that Kuya might actually be the real deal. Some people immediately recognized rank 13, Kei. However, those who did not know him asked whether he was famous. Another person replied that Kei was basically a complete weirdo. They described him as a battle maniac who constantly searched for strong opponents. Suddenly, the man warned everyone nearby to stay away before they got caught in the crossfire. Kuya confronted Kei and demanded to know what exactly he thought he was doing. He pointed out how dangerous those actions were. Kei looked amused by his reaction, especially after hearing that Kuya was supposedly stronger than him. Kuya was completely stunned by that statement. A while earlier, inside a quiet bar, Kei questioned Inui about why he had called him there. Then, he bluntly asked whether Inui had finally decided to fight him. Inui calmly replied that he had not, and explained that he wanted to discuss something else instead. He offered Kei a seat. However, Kei simply replied that he was leaving. Inui then offered him some high-quality milk instead. That immediately stopped Kei from walking away. He turned around, returned to the counter, and began drinking it, while stating that he would leave as soon as he finished. Only then did Inui finally explain that he wanted Kei to make contact with a certain boy. This boy happened to be the person who encountered and survived the Calamity earlier that morning. Kei asked why that mattered. Inui explained that Kei had sensed it too, that the Calamity had been dangerously close to special grade level. Therefore, if that Calamity had truly been repelled, then this boy might actually be stronger than Kei himself. That completely stunned Kei. Inui wanted to know whether the boy shared the same aspirations as them. He added that if Kei did not want to handle it, then he would personally take care of the matter himself. Kei immediately asked whether Inui intended to fight the boy. Inui calmly replied that it would depend on the circumstances. Kei's brows furrowed. He finished the rest of his milk in one go. Then, the moment he emptied the glass, he declared that he would be the one to fight Kei. Inui calmly replied that when the time came, he would accept Kei's challenge. Back in the present moment, Kei checked Koya's status window. He remarked that Koya's stats looked completely bugged. Something about them was obviously not right. Koya felt his skin sting from the pressure alone. Compared to this, even Tanba was nothing. The strength Koya sensed from Kei existed on an entirely different level. Kei remarked that if Koya refused to come to him, then he would simply approach Koya himself. He immediately unleashed another attack, forcing Koya to barely evade it in time. Koya shouted for him to stop because he had absolutely no intention of fighting him. Kei challenged him to try stopping him instead. Koya continued dodging the attacks while desperately wondering what he should do. One thing was certain. If he lost control and got defeated, Mugen would appear. And that was the one outcome he absolutely wanted to avoid. Blue energy gathered within Kei's palm. Then he hurled the attack forward and ordered Kuya to hurry up and reveal his true power already. His arm overflowed with terrifying energy. He was trying to force Kuya into exposing his real strength. Kuya immediately realized how bad the situation had become. He prepared to dodge. But then, he suddenly noticed a child standing directly in the attack's path. His eyes widened in shock. The child was too terrified to even move. Koya yelled at Kei to stop because there was a child there. But Kei showed no intention of stopping, forcing Koya to block the attack with his forearms instead. A massive explosion swallowed the area in blinding light. When the smoke finally cleared, Kei calmly stood amidst the destruction. He remarked that no matter how he looked at it, Koya definitely was not just level 8. Meanwhile, Koya tightly held the child protectively in his arms. He was furious at Kei and demanded to know what his intentions actually were. That kind of power was supposed to defeat calamities and protect people. Kei immediately replied that it was not. He revealed that he simply fought because it was fun. To him, it made no difference whether the opponent was a human or a calamity. All he cared about was testing the limits of his own strength. Infuriated, Kuya shouted for him to stop messing around. He declared that someone who used power so arrogantly was no different from a Calamity himself. Kei taunted Kuya by suggesting that he try defeating him if he truly believed that. Blue energy condensed into a sphere directly in front of Kei. He expected Kuya to rush toward him. Kuya suddenly became confused when Kei appeared far closer than expected for the attack. A punch nearly slammed into him. Kuya wondered if Kei had just teleported. Then, Kuya noticed Kei's stance. He realized Kei was about to charge once again. Suddenly, Kei closed the distance so quickly that Kuya could barely dodge in time. He realized that his body itself was being forcibly dragged toward Kei. Then Kei delivered a powerful kick. Mugen immediately realized what was happening and found the entire situation amusing. Mugen encouraged Kuya to hurry up and die already so he could finally take over the body completely. Desperate, Kuya poured all his strength into his fist and launched a counterattack. At the same time, Kei clenched his fist as blue energy gathered around it. Kuya was caught completely off guard. Instead of being pulled toward Kei this time, his body was suddenly pushed away with violent force, causing him to slam hard into a wall. Kei raised the orb of energy resting on his palm before leaping into the air. Then he hurled it directly toward Kuya. Kuya barely managed to dodge before appearing behind Kei. Kei questioned why Kuya kept pretending to hold back. However, when he turned around, he immediately noticed something different. Kuya now wore an extremely serious expression. He suddenly rushed forward. Kuya realized that Kei's ability allowed him to manipulate his movements while firing off devastating energy blasts. He still had no idea what kind of skill it actually was. However, he noticed one important detail. Every time Kei clenched his hand, Kuya's body was forcibly moved. Because of that realization, Kuya chose to engage him in close combat instead. He threw a punch directly at Kei. Bursts of energy exploded around their fists as the two continuously exchanged blows. Kei remarked that everything Kuya did was unbelievably boring. Then he punched Kuya directly in the jaw. A second later, he struck him from the opposite side. He grabbed Kuya by the shirt and began punching him repeatedly without stopping. Kuya could feel just how monstrously strong Kei truly was, and he quickly realized that he could never win in a pure fist fight against him. But even then, he could still speak. He shared that he had always been known as the useless Hachiko, but now he was finally going to show everyone the person he had become. He could fight now, and for the first time in his life, he believed he actually had a chance. He threw another punch toward Kei, but Kei easily caught his fist and told him that he had absolutely zero chance of winning. With his other hand, Kei condensed an overwhelming amount of power. Kuya instantly realized how bad the situation was. Then the attack slammed directly into his stomach. A blinding light consumed the entire area. Afterward, Kei sighed in disappointment. He complained that the entire experience had been terrible. He muttered that Inui had tricked him because the fight was not fun at all. Suddenly, however, Kei sensed an energy that immediately made him stop walking away. Dark energy began pouring out from Kuya's body. Mugen had regained control the moment Kuya lost consciousness. Kei stood there stunned. Mugen looked at him and declared that he expected Kei to entertain him properly. Then Mugen warned the mushroom head to brace himself. Mugen laughed loudly. He was thrilled now that it was finally his turn to play. Kei looked confused. He wondered if Kuya had become a completely different person. Even though the appearance was mostly the same, Kei could tell that the being standing before him was no longer acting human at all. It felt like an entirely different creature had taken over. Mugen suddenly lunged forward. Kei's eyes widened in shock when a slash tore across his body and blood sprayed into the air. For a brief moment, he genuinely thought he had been killed. He dropped to one knee while clutching his side as Mugen slowly loomed over him. Mugen remarked that he had originally aimed for Kei's head, but Kei barely managed to dodge at the last possible moment. Then, he asked whether Kei could still fight because he could smell the exact same thing coming from him. Joy. A crazed smile slowly spread across Kei's face. Kei suddenly leaped upward and launched another attack. Mugen declared that he had already figured out the secret behind Kei's ability. He guessed that it involved compression, such as compressing either space itself or matter. Kei confirmed that Mugen was correct. Energy condensed within Kei's palm once more. Kei warned him that if the attack landed, calling it painful would not even come close to describing the damage. The two clashed head-on as their powers collided in a blinding explosion of energy. Mugen found it genuinely interesting, remarking that ordinary calamities did not possess abilities like this. Kei was suddenly caught off guard. Mugen's punch slammed directly into his face. The impact was so overwhelming that when Kei crashed into the ground, the earth itself caved inward. Mugen declared that skills meant absolutely nothing in the face of overwhelming power. He mocked Kei by saying that even if a mouse grew horns, a tiger would never flinch because of it. Even while lying on the ground, Kei gathered his power once more and hurled it at Mugen. Mugen's arm was instantly severed. Mugen casually commented that Kuya's body truly had belonged to a weak little mouse. Then his arm regenerated. However, the restored arm now looked monstrous and inhuman. Kei stared in shock. Witnessing that level of regeneration made him question whether Kuya was even human anymore. Mugen suddenly grabbed Kei by the shirt. Then he lifted him straight into the air. A violent burst of force erupted as Mugen slammed Kei brutally into the ground. Kei lay within the rubble and admitted that Mugen was strong. Then he activated his ability, Sanctuary, Absolute Territory. A blinding wave of energy flooded the entire area as he unleashed Absolute Territory. Floating within the overwhelming light, Kei spread his arms and remarked that this situation had finally become fun. A grin immediately spread across Mugen's face as he declared that he would push things even further. The two stared each other down while anticipating the next attack. The crowd watched in complete terror. Meanwhile, the receptionist desperately begged them to stop fighting already. Suddenly, another figure appeared. The moment the receptionist saw that person, she immediately stopped crying. At the exact instant, Kei and Mugen clashed once again. A massive explosion erupted throughout the area. Eventually, the smoke began to settle. Inui was revealed standing directly between the two fighters, blocking both of their attacks with his own energy while forcibly separating them apart. Inui demanded to know what exactly they thought they were doing. Both Kei and Mugen were left stunned. Inui stood there calmly while several powerful rankers lined up behind him. Every single one of them wore a stern expression. Kei told Inui not to interfere. A woman standing behind Inui pointed a needle-like weapon directly toward Kei and questioned whether someone in his condition should really still be moving around. Kei's sharp gaze shifted toward her. She simply glared right back at him without fear. Inui firmly told Kei that enough was enough. He warned him that if he kept whining, then he would not get off lightly either. Behind Inui, the rankers were already prepared to draw their weapons at any moment. Mugen commented that Mr. Nice Guy had finally shown up and remarked that it had been a long time. He casually stated that the kid had not been enough to entertain him. Then he told Inui that they should finally settle the fight from 6 years ago. He even added that he did not care if all of them decided to jump him together. Mugen was getting completely fired up. But suddenly, he clicked his tongue in annoyance. He complained that the body was unbelievably frustrating to use. At that moment, Kuya realized that he had regained control again. His body nearly collapsed to the floor, but Inui caught him before he could hit the ground. Inui quietly looked at Koya and remembered that he was the same boy who had once asked how he could become one of the numbers. Then realization finally sank in. Inui carried Kuya in his arms. However, someone suddenly told him to wait. Kei declared that the boy was his prey and that he had no intention of handing him over. Inui calmly told him to move aside. He explained that the numbers would later decide Koya's fate, along with Kei's punishment as well. Kei looked confused by that statement. Inui explained that he had only wanted to confirm whether Koya was truly on their side, yet somehow the situation had turned into a complete disaster instead. He declared that this was a severe violation of regulations and warned Kei that he would also be held responsible. Kei dismissively replied that those rules only existed because they were convenient for people like Inui. Inui responded that Kei should hurry up and stand on the side, powerful enough to force its own convenience onto others. With that, Inui turned around and walked away. Kuya slowly regained consciousness. He asked where he was. To his surprise, he found himself strapped into a metal chair, both his hands and neck tightly locked in place. Inui stood before him and calmly stated, "So, you've finally woken up." Koya managed a small smile when he saw him. Inui continued, explaining that Koya had engaged in an unauthorized duel between rankers, causing massive destruction to nearby structures and even resulting in casualties. As a result, Inui declared that Kuya was being sentenced to death by execution. Kuya's eyes widened in shock and fear. At the Numbers Association headquarters, Kuya Kamakami sat restrained in a chair. He was completely shocked. A grim reaper-like figure appeared before him. Inui coldly announced that Kuya's execution would now begin and ordered Kurusu to carry out the sentence. Koya was left speechless. The man wearing glasses calmly told Koya not to resent him because he was merely following orders. Koya desperately thought that they absolutely could not do this because of Mugen living inside him. He pleaded for Inui to listen and shouted that they absolutely could not execute him. He tried to explain that if he died, the calamity sealed within him would be unleashed. However, before he could even finish speaking, a slash suddenly cut through the air. The chains restraining Koya were instantly severed and crashed onto the floor. Koya stared in confusion. Inui had already confirmed the truth himself. He apologized for being rough with Koya, explaining that he needed Koya to personally admit the truth before he could properly prove it. Koya tried to say something. However, Inui interrupted him and spoke toward the CCTV cameras instead, asking whether they had all seen enough. He explained that Koya's violent rampages up until now had all been caused by the calamity living inside him. Then he asked whether they still intended to continue with the execution. A government official speaking through the camera stated that they would leave the matter entirely in Inui's hands. However, if another incident happened, Inui himself would be held responsible. Inui calmly replied that he was fine with that because taking responsibility was the duty of adults. Then he casually remarked that some adults seemed extremely eager to avoid responsibility altogether. The official reminded him that the government was providing the Numbers Association with an enormous budget and ordered them to quickly create a world free from calamities. Inui simply acknowledged the order with a respectful bow. Once the meeting ended, Kurusu prepared to leave the room. Inui quietly noticed him. Koya finally realized that the man was Akikyo Kurusu, the number 2 ranker among the numbers. Kurusu stated that he was a very busy person. Koya then noticed the girl beside them casually blowing bubblegum and realized that she was Mitsumi Shinomai, the number 10 ranker among the numbers. He was amazed that there were actually 3 members of the numbers gathered inside the same room. Kurusu remarked that even the smallest uncertainty should always be eliminated. He firmly expressed his belief that the boy should still be executed. With that, he quietly closed the door behind him. Mitsumi clicked her tongue and complained that Kurusu was way too full of himself. Inui defended him by pointing out that Kurusu still played along with his little act and even used his skills to help him. That was why he actually liked him. He thanked Mitsumi for staying, but she immediately announced that she was leaving too. Afterward, Inui turned his attention toward Kuya Kamikami. Inui remarked that this was already the 3rd time he had saved Kuya. He apologized for not recognizing him earlier. Kuya was stunned that Inui actually remembered him. Kuya then asked how Inui had figured out that there was a calamity living inside him. Inui claimed that he simply had a very good sense of smell, and Kuya carried the scent of a calamity. Kuya looked shocked by that answer. Inui also brought up the drastic changes in Kuya's appearance and personality. He stated that it was obviously not happening through Kuya's own will, and he also could not believe it was merely some kind of skill. On top of that, when Inui met Koya the day before, he had not smelled like a calamity at all. And Koya also just happened to be present at the abandoned building in Shibuya when the calamity first appeared. Taking all those details into consideration, Inui concluded that a calamity was somehow interfering with Kuya, although he admitted that he had only been half convinced because the situation itself was completely unprecedented. Then, he asked Koya to tell him everything. He promised Koya that he was on his side. Hearing those words made warmth spread through Koya's chest. Tears welled up in his eyes. After everything that had happened, he was relieved to finally meet the Inui he had admired all this time. He was genuinely glad that he had come there. Kuya confessed that a calamity truly resided inside him. He explained that earlier that day, he had been attacked by one inside the subway. Afterward, more calamities began gathering around him. Inui mentioned hearing that Kuya had wiped them all out. Kuya admitted that he seemed capable of using a portion of the calamity's power. Then, Kuya remembered the important thing he originally wanted to tell him. He was just about to confess it when a menacing creature suddenly burst into the room. A man wearing a fur coat appeared. He greeted Inui before questioning when exactly the city had become some kind of gathering place for calamities. He casually mentioned that he had already killed 3 of them on his way there. Then he pointed out that the room itself also reeked of calamity. His gaze immediately landed on Koya, and instantly he knew Koya was the one. In the very next heartbeat, he launched an attack at Koya. Koya immediately vomited onto the ground from the impact. Inui became concerned for him. He demanded to know what Teo thought he was doing. Inui told him to look carefully again, because Koya was still human. Koya recognized the man immediately. It was Teo Sumeragi, the fourth of the numbers. Teo quickly realized that Koya was the so-called Calamity brat who had supposedly been sentenced to death. He questioned why the boy was still alive. Inui calmly replied that they had decided to spare him. Teo immediately asked whether this was just another one of Inui's unilateral decisions. He pointed out that important matters like this were supposed to be discussed among all the numbers together. Inui corrected him and clarified that the assembled numbers had already reached a decision. He added that if they waited around for unreliable people like Teo, then nothing would ever get decided at all. He even admitted that he was honestly surprised Teo had bothered to show up in the first place. Teo took those words as permission to voice his opinion. He immediately declared a death sentence for the brat who reeked of calamity. Then he charged forward again, while announcing that the execution would happen right there and then. Kuya watched as Teo charged straight toward him. The attack triggered a massive explosion. Kuya simply braced himself for impact. However, when he slowly opened his eyes again, he was shocked to see Teo pinned on the ground while Inui twisted his arm behind his back. Inui firmly stated that the decision had already been made. Teo forcefully broke free before angrily shouting at Inui not to look down on him. He accused Inui of always acting the exact same way ever since the beginning, constantly smiling while making every important decision on his own. Inui calmly told him to listen carefully. He explained that their ultimate goal was to win the war against the endlessly appearing calamities and restore the peaceful world humanity once possessed. He emphasized just how valuable Koya's existence could become because of his unique ability to coexist and communicate with calamities. Inui suggested that Kuya might someday become the light, capable of solving everything. Teo scoffed at the idea. He questioned how someone who seemed to embody all of the world's weaknesses could ever become humanity's hope. Kuya stepped forward and admitted that he was not someone special at all. He confessed that he had willingly allowed a calamity to enter his body, and he honestly had no idea what might eventually happen to him. That was the reason he came there in the first place, because he could no longer handle everything alone. Then he made a serious request toward Inui. He asked that if he were ever fully possessed by the calamity and started hurting innocent people again, he wanted Inui to kill both him and the calamity together. Koya deeply bowed his head. Teo looked genuinely surprised by those words. Even Inui remained speechless for a few moments. Eventually, Inui gently patted Koya on the head and remarked that simply being capable of saying those words already proved how strong he truly was. With a warm smile, Inui told Koya to leave everything to him and promised that he would do absolutely everything possible to prevent that future from happening. Koya was deeply moved. Teo asked Inui whether he seriously intended to become friends with calamities. He completely rejected both Inui's ideals and the boy standing before him. He firmly believed that every single calamity had to be exterminated. Otherwise, humanity would never have a future. Inui remarked that gaining people's understanding was truly difficult. Koya could only respond with a small laugh. Inui then stated that there was no point in giving Kuya false comfort, so he decided to tell him the truth directly. Kuya would never be able to return to his old life again. From that moment onward, Kuya would accompany one of the numbers. Kuya replied that he had already prepared himself for something like that, though he soon reacted in surprise afterward. Inui explained that the numbers were a group filled with complete eccentrics, meaning Kuya would definitely struggle dealing with them. Then Inui carefully observed Kuya for a moment and calmly stated that something about him simply was not suitable. Later on, Kuya changed into a brand new uniform. It was the official Numbers Association uniform distributed to candidates. Inui wanted Kuya to wear it, and Kuya loudly declared that he would wear it forever without ever taking it off. Inui apologized for not answering Kuya's earlier question about how someone became one of the numbers. He explained that he did not stand at the top through effort alone. He stood there because of results. Results gained from defeating more calamities and saving more people than anyone else. Then he told Kuya to produce results as well, and prove that he could become more useful to humanity than anyone else. Kuya immediately shouted an energetic and determined yes. That night, Kuya received a text message from Inui informing him that a calamity had appeared, and for this mission, he would be accompanying the problem child among the numbers, number 4, Teo. Although Koya already understood how difficult Teo was after meeting him the previous day, he became even more surprised after researching him further. During his student days, Teo had been disowned by his parents and climbed his way to success with nothing but his own abilities. Now, he managed host clubs, hostess clubs, and restaurants across the city. He carried the title Emperor of the Night. When Koya finally arrived at the mission site, Teo greeted him by saying he was glad Koya had managed to make it there. Because if Koya had arrived even a single second later, Teo would have already killed him. Startled, Koya immediately called out his name. However, Teo suddenly charged straight toward him while declaring that he still intended to kill him anyway. Teo called him a calamity. Koya was shocked. He barely managed to dodge the attack. Even then, the strike still grazed him. Koya desperately told Teo to wait. Deep down, he wondered whether Teo hated him because of the calamity living inside him. However, Teo revealed that the real reason was because Koya kept wagging his tail after Sika Inui. That completely confused Koya. He remembered how Teo and Inui constantly argued the previous day and began wondering what kind of history the two of them shared. Teo then declared that even if Inui had decided to spare Koya, he personally would never acknowledge him until he judged the boy with his own eyes. 15 minutes remained before the Calamity's appearance. Teo demanded that Koya prove his worth. Otherwise, he would kill him right there on the spot. Koya pointed out that unauthorized duels between rankers were forbidden and questioned what Inui would think if he saw this happening. Teo completely brushed off the mention of Inui because he had no intention of obeying him. He boldly declared that he himself was the rule. 14 minutes remained. Teo asked Koya whether he truly had time to stand around chatting. Koya thought about it carefully. Then, realizing that he could not afford to die there, he prepared himself to fight. He declared that he would become Teo's opponent. Meanwhile, back at the Numbers Association headquarters, Inui sat deep in thought. Mitsumi questioned whether it was really a good idea to send Koya out on a mission already. She worried that pairing Koya with Teo for 2 straight days would only end with him getting killed. Inui replied that he was not the one who decided the assignments. Even so, he believed Teo was already a grown adult and would know where to draw the line. He added that he was personally interested in the potential Koya possessed. Mitsumi asked whether that was because of the calamity living inside him. Inui replied that it was not. He explained that what truly interested him was Koya himself, the fact that he still had not been completely consumed by the calamity. Inui remarked that Koya seemed to be hiding something special, even if Koya himself had not realized it yet. Back at the mission site, Koya threw a powerful punch toward Teo. Teo calmly dodged the attack. Then he immediately counterattacked. Koya instantly realized how painful the strike was. Teo was unbelievably strong, and Koya was barely managing to keep up with him at all. Even so, Koya believed he might still be able to land a counterattack somehow. He thought he could push through it, until his body suddenly began feeling strange. Koya looked down at the cuts covering his arms. Teo laughed at him. Then he revealed that his ability involved toxins and poison. A status window appeared before Koya, revealing Teo's level as 8,100. Koya collapsed onto the ground, while writhing in pain. Teo smiled as he watched Koya suffer. He expected even the slightest movement to put Koya through unbearable agony. Suddenly, the system notified Koya about his skill. Unlimited Awakening. And then, the skill display suddenly turned blank. Koya's eyes changed and began glowing blue. Teo revealed that his skill was called Toxin. In simple terms, he controlled poison itself. The poison released from his body destroyed nerves, muscles, and every single cell it touched. Mockingly, he asked Koya if it hurt. Teo sneered and claimed that the pain should have been so unbearable that Koya could not even move a single finger anymore. He stepped directly onto Koya's chest and coldly remarked that Inui's eyes were truly worthless. According to him, there was no way someone like Koya could ever become humanity's hope. Then he asked the Calamity brat whether he had any last words. However, after noticing that Koya could not even speak because his windpipe had been blocked, Teo simply told him to die quietly like that. As Teo turned around to leave, Koya suddenly warned him not to insult Inui. Teo immediately stopped in surprise. Koya weakly stated that pain was nothing new to him because he had already experienced more than enough suffering in his life. To him, this level of pain was nothing. Then Koya slowly forced himself back onto his feet. Teo stared at him in complete disbelief. The poison should have been powerful enough to instantly kill even an elephant. At that moment, he realized that this kid was definitely abnormal. Teo repeated Koya's earlier words about not insulting Inui. He insisted that he was merely speaking the truth, because nobody else understood Inui's true dark nature. Kuya shouted at him to stop talking. He declared that Inui was the very first person who had ever acknowledged his existence, so he would never tolerate anyone insulting him. Teo warned Kauya that blind faith like that was dangerous. Suddenly, he activated a technique known as Pluto Snow, Ashes of Death. White particles slowly began falling from the sky. Kauya looked confused as he stared at the snow. Then, out of nowhere, birds suddenly died mid-air and crashed onto the ground. Kauya stood there dumbfounded. Only then did he realize that the snow itself was poisonous. Blood immediately started flowing from his eyes. It was a deadly snowfall that mercilessly took lives away. It resembled nothing less than a weapon of mass destruction. And to Teo, that overwhelming destructive force represented the true power of the numbers. Kuya collapsed face first into a pool of his own blood, while Teo calmly explained that no living creature had ever survived that attack before. He had buried countless calamities using that very same skill. Teo bitterly complained that everyone only ever praised Inui while labeling his own abilities as dangerous and uncontrollable instead. He added that Inui constantly kept everything tightly restrained and imposed restrictions on everyone around him. Even Teo himself was no exception. Then Teo glanced toward Kuya again, and immediately questioned why he was still standing. Apparently, Kuya had somehow moved behind him. Teo wondered whether Kuya possessed poison resistance, or if his body was somehow producing antibodies and detoxifying itself in real time. In the end, he concluded that no normal human should have been capable of something like that. He questioned whether this power came from the calamity living inside Kuya, or from something else entirely. A status screen suddenly appeared. It identified Kuya Kamakami with no skill, level 8, and the rank of Awakening. The most suspicious part was the fact that there was still no listed skill at all. Kuya firmly declared that he would never hand his body over to Mugen ever again. With intense determination burning in his eyes, he shouted that he absolutely could not die there. Teo grinned wildly and remarked that Kuya was the very first person who had ever stood back up after being poisoned by him. He exclaimed that Kuya's existence itself was completely insane. The two immediately clashed once again. Their battle rapidly intensified. At that exact moment, the countdown finally reached 0. A portal suddenly shattered open. Then a grotesque blue creature manifested before them. Both Kuya and Teo instantly shifted their attention toward the monster and shouted at it to get out of their way. The two moved at explosive speed and tore straight through the creature together. A massive shockwave erupted throughout the surroundings. Only seconds after killing the Calamity, both of them immediately charged toward each other once more while unleashing fiery waves of energy. Shouting fiercely, they hurled their fists toward one another. However, a loud announcement suddenly echoed throughout the area. The emergency broadcast informed all nearby residents that the Calamity had already been successfully subjugated and that the restricted zone had officially been lifted. The announcement repeated itself again. Teo looked disappointed. He acknowledged that Kuya had managed to survive against him. Unexpectedly, Teo invited Kuya to come work under him instead. Kuya was completely caught off guard by the offer. However, he refused. He chose to place his trust in Inui instead. Teo simply replied that it did not matter either way. He only emphasized that he had already warned Kuya. Then he quietly walked away. Kuya reflected that in the end, he still had not learned the truth behind everything. He continued wondering what exactly was going on with Inui. From that day onward, number 4, Kozuki Teo, was no longer recognized as one of the numbers, and his whereabouts eventually became unknown. Inui received the news regarding Teo. Inui apologized and admitted that he had never imagined Teo would act that way. He blamed himself for failing to foresee what would happen. However, Kuya immediately told him that he did not need to apologize for any of it. Inui replied that mistakes made within their organization were still ultimately their responsibility. Then, as Teo's older brother, he apologized once again. Kuya froze in complete shock after hearing that the two of them were actually siblings. Inui casually asked whether he had never mentioned it before. Then he calmly confirmed that he and Teo were indeed brothers. Kuya pointed out that the information had never even been publicly revealed, not even to Inui's own fans. Inui replied that he personally had no issue making it public, but he believed Teo would have hated that. He admitted that he had never truly been able to understand his younger brother and bitterly referred to himself as a failure of an older brother. Then Inui asked whether Teo had said anything about him during the mission. Kuya remembered Teiyo talking about Inui's hidden dark nature and even inviting him to work under him instead. But in the end, Kuya simply answered that Teiyo had not really said anything. Inui quietly acknowledged the answer before informing Kuya that he had successfully subjugated the Calamity and completed the mission. Then, with a calm smile, he invited Kuya to come back home. Kuya Kamikami stood in front of his school building and quietly acknowledged that it had been a long time since he last returned there. Earlier, Inui had instructed him to go back to school. Kuya hesitated and pointed out that it might be dangerous because calamities naturally gathered around him now. Inui questioned whether that was really a reason to avoid going, especially when Kuya still needed to handle withdrawal procedures and collect his belongings. Then he asked whether Kuya truly did not want to meet his teachers or say goodbye to his friends. He reassured Kuya that he would personally handle all the arrangements, so Kuya did not need to worry about calamities appearing. Inui then instructed Shizuka to prepare everything. Shizuka confidently assured him that she would handle all the arrangements properly. Inui simply told Kuya to enjoy his final day at school. Standing alone at the school gates, Kuya thought to himself that Inui was genuinely kind. However, he personally did not have many good memories connected to school. Suddenly, someone shouted his name from behind him. Startled, Kuya turned around and saw teacher Okabe. Kuya immediately remembered how Okabe once called him a failure and a disgrace to the school, even ordering him to start over from the very beginning. The teacher looked like he was about to say something, but Kuya suddenly blurted out an apology for being absent without permission. Unexpectedly, the teacher burst into laughter and said that it was not a problem at all. He even added that Kuya had become the pride of the school. Kuya stood there completely dumbfounded. The other students soon noticed him as well and immediately recognized him as the numbers candidate. Excitedly, they shouted that he was the same numbers candidate they had seen on the news. They talked about how Kuya and Kozuki Teiyo had successfully wiped out a calamity together. Kuya had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. He quickly searched it online and confirmed that the news was actually real. A crowd instantly gathered around him and began asking endless questions about the numbers. Kuya answered that he had personally met Inui, which immediately made everyone even more excited. Then suddenly someone forcefully pushed through the crowd. A man glared at Kuya and demanded to know whether he was that Hachiko bastard. Kuya recognized him as one of Tanba's men and cautiously mentioned that he had heard Tanba was currently hospitalized. The man brushed it off and told Kuya not to talk about someone who was not even there. Then his attitude suddenly became friendly as he told Kuya that he was amazing now. So it did not feel right calling him Hachiko anymore. He quietly whispered that he was actually a huge fan of Mitsumi and asked Kuya if he could somehow get her autograph for him. Kuya replied that he would try since he had already met her before. The man became extremely excited after hearing that. Kuya felt completely overwhelmed by the sudden change in treatment. Later, he attended class and chatted casually with his classmates. Then he joined sports activities and surprisingly did well at them. He even ate lunch together with his friends. For the first time, it made him realize that school was actually fun. As Kuya reflected on everything, he realized that while he had never truly liked school itself, it had still been the only place where he ever felt like he belonged. And now, he could never return to that ordinary life again. Suddenly, a black vehicle screeched to a stop right in front of him. Kuya and the others stared in shock. Shizuka stepped out of the car and informed him that she had come to pick him up. She explained that Inui was currently waiting for him at the numbers headquarters because of an urgent matter. Kuya immediately recognized her as Inui's secretary. Then, in the blink of an eye, the car sped away. His classmates watched in complete awe while commenting on how cool everything looked. Back at the numbers headquarters, Inui warmly greeted Kuya and asked how school had gone. Kuya looked slightly unwell, but he quickly replied that it was nothing serious. Then, he brought up how everyone suddenly doted on him now, something that would have been impossible before the Calamity incident. He admitted that the feeling was strangely complicated. Inui commented that Kuya was still pessimistic as always. He added that if he were in Koya's position, he would probably just accept that power as his own ability. Kuya immediately puffed up and argued that it really was his ability, and the exaggerated way he reacted caused both of them to laugh together. Afterward, Inui explained that Kuya would continue accompanying the numbers from now on. He warned him that the numbers were filled with even more eccentric people than Teiyo, meaning Koya's struggles were only beginning. Then Inui asked whether Kuya could truly keep up with all of them, to which Kuya confidently answered yes. Kuya then asked about the emergency situation. Inui glanced toward Shizuka and asked her to explain everything instead, Shizuka informed Kuya that they would first do a little studying before getting into the main topic. She explained that calamities originated from another world, and the stronger a calamity was, the longer it took to fully transfer into their world. After noticing Kaoya's reaction, she asked what the problem was. Kaoya casually replied that the drawing she used was cute. Shizuka immediately blushed and hurriedly told him to focus properly. She continued explaining that for advanced or higher level gate transfers, the remaining transfer time would appear as a visible countdown counter. The basic mechanism was simple. Once the number reached 0, a calamity would manifest. Moving on to the actual topic, Shizuka asked whether Kaoya had heard about the gate that appeared in Yokohama. Kaoya confirmed that he had seen it reported on the news. It was a mysterious gate where absolutely nothing had emerged. Shizuka explained that it had originally been classified as an advanced gate because of its transfer time, so the association stationed top-ranked individuals nearby in preparation for advanced-level calamities. However, even after the countdown reached 0, nothing appeared from the gate at all. Because of that, the association continued monitoring it closely. But only moments earlier, there had finally been movement inside the gate. Kuya immediately asked whether a calamity had emerged, but instead of a monster, what came out was black mist. Kuya reacted in complete shock. Shizuka explained that all communication systems and radio signals within the surrounding area had become completely disrupted. Because visibility inside the mist was nearly non-existent, nobody knew what was actually happening within the zone. Inui added that there were far too few similar cases for them to properly analyze the situation. As a precaution, they decided to dispatch the numbers in case a special grade calamity eventually appeared. That meant Kuya, alongside the numbers, would immediately head to the site in order to investigate the area and rescue the team members trapped inside. Their mission was to seal the gate itself. Kuya quietly wondered whether sealing a gate was even truly possible. It sounded like an incredibly difficult mission. However, the numbers possessed gate sealing specialists, and those individuals were already heading toward the site. Suddenly, someone burst into the room. A man stumbled inside while covered in blood and leaning heavily against a crutch. He apologized to Inui and claimed that the calamity had gotten the better of him, so he could no longer continue the mission. Gasping heavily, he declared that he would leave the rest in their hands. Kaoya's jaw instantly dropped. Then the man collapsed onto the floor. Koya immediately recognized the injured man as Sasaragi, one of the numbers. He urgently shouted for someone to call medical treatment immediately. However, Kuya became confused when he noticed Inui's completely calm expression. Inui simply told Sasaragi to stop fooling around because he struggled dramatically like this every single time. Kuya stared in confusion. Sasaragi let out a tired sigh. Then suddenly, he stood up perfectly fine, as if absolutely nothing had happened. Kuya was completely dumbfounded. Sasaragi had never actually been injured at all. He simply muttered that everything was annoying. Then he looked toward Koya and asked who exactly he was. He mentioned that Koya's face looked strangely familiar. Then suddenly, he remembered. Without warning, Sasaragi started flailing dramatically across the floor. He complained that even thinking, standing, and sitting down felt like too much effort. Then he asked once again who the kid was supposed to be. Koya introduced himself properly. The moment Sasaragi heard the name, he immediately realized that this was the same person the association had been making a huge fuss about. He instantly told them not to drag him into this mess because it sounded far too troublesome for him to tolerate. Sasaragi then asked Inui what exactly was happening and whether he was supposed to head to Yokohama now. Inui calmly assigned him to the mission. Sasaragi would accompany Koya to seal the gate, while also teaching him everything he needed to know. Koya looked completely surprised by the decision. However, Sasaragi looked even more shocked than him, and his reaction came out as one extremely long, confused, "Huh?" He immediately refused. He demanded to know why he had to take on such an unbelievably troublesome assignment. Inui calmly told him to stop whining and explained that guiding candidates was part of the official duties of the numbers. Panicking, Sasaragi argued that guidance meant he would actually have to think for himself and make decisions personally. Then he continued rolling around on the floor while throwing a full tantrum because the entire thing sounded like way too much work. Completely freaked out, Kaoya wondered what exactly was wrong with this guy. A helicopter flew over Yokohama toward a massive black mist covering the area. From the open door, Koya called out to Sasaragi as he spotted the fog and confirmed that the entire place was surrounded by it. Inside the helicopter, Sasaragi cried out that he was terrified because he had acrophobia and desperately begged to go home. Kuya shouted that he had never heard of a number being afraid of heights and called it completely troublesome. Sasaragi argued that dismissing it was discrimination against numbers. As Kuya told him to stop talking nonsense, Sasaragi collapsed onto his seat and claimed he was losing consciousness from fear. Kuya watched him fall asleep. It made him wonder whether he was really okay. The two stood before the black mist. Kuya remarked that it looked even more ominous up close. Their mission was to rescue the rankers, subjugate the Calamity, and close the gate. When Kuya asked if he could really close it, Sasaragi suddenly claimed he was suffering from malnutrition, muscle strain, and a skull fracture while pulling out an IV drip. He really was overreacting. Kuya shouted in shock and demanded to know why he even had that with him. Sasaragi lay down on a nearby bench and weakly said he would leave the rest to Kuya. Deep inside, Kuya knew he was faking it. He questioned why someone like him belonged to the numbers. He then concluded that he had to handle the situation himself. Unlike previous calamities, this black mist was completely unknown. At first, he doubted himself. Then he resolved that he had to do it for the sake of Inui, who had acknowledged him. Determined, Kuya declared that he could do it before the mist suddenly swallowed him. Outside, Sasaragi rested comfortably on the bench with his IV drip and muttered that he was glad he slept. Shocked, Kuya suddenly found himself dragged deep into the fog. The inside was completely dark. He could barely see anything. He wondered if the advance team had also been dragged in like that. Suddenly, something tried to attack him. Kuya dodged immediately. He was surprised by what he saw next. There were countless monstrous hands. He wondered if the black mist itself was the Calamity. He activated his skill, Infinite Awakening. He dodged the attacks. He tried to punch it, but he realized he was not hitting anything. He figured it was because the creature was made of fog. His eyes widened in shock. A massive force slammed into him and blasted him backward. He raised his guard against the shockwave. But suddenly, a giant, dark hand grabbed his body and restrained him completely. More clawed hands surrounded him as he realized the Calamity could attack him freely while his own attacks could not connect. The Calamity overwhelmed him with relentless attacks. He gritted his teeth in frustration and remarked how unreasonable the situation was. He forced himself free and decided to retreat. He realized that it was foolish to fight head-on in the enemy's territory. He added that fighting without knowing the opponent's characteristics was beyond stupid. The black mist continued chasing after him. He resolved to wait and watch. Meanwhile, Sasaragi looked comfortable on the bench. He wondered if Kuya had already run away. However, he quickly realized that was not happening and that Kuya was clearly aiming for something. Hiding behind a wall, Kuya realized the Calamity was looking for him visually. He concluded that the main body controlling the hands was hidden somewhere inside the fog. Kuya forced himself to think carefully to find it. He remembered information about every number. Then he recalled a ranker from 4 years ago who fought a slime Calamity. That Calamity could dissolve into water, become invisible, and attack freely when cornered. However, the ranker still found a way to defeat it. Kuya remembered how brilliant and messy that battle had been. He was so excited and trembling back then when he learned about it. Kuya realized the same method might work here, although it carried serious risks. Suddenly, a black mist loomed directly overhead. Looking up, Kuya saw the missing rankers suspended in the air beneath a strange purple aura. At first, he feared they were dead. But on closer look, he realized they were still alive. He knew he could save them if he acted fast. He released a burst of energy and shouted for the Calamity to reveal itself. A glowing red eye stared at him from the darkness. Kuya tried to sense where it was watching him from. Kuya immediately charged forward. A massive blast of purple energy suddenly rained down on him. His eyes widened in shock as he witnessed how huge the Calamity reality was. He defended himself while enduring the relentless attacks, though he got scratched all over his body. Then he remembered a detail. The ranker from before had fled to a palace while taking enemy attacks. That place was surrounded on 3 sides by reefs. He went to a dead-end alley. Back then, the ranker lost his escape route, making him desperate. Finally, a goblin appeared. The alleyway was empty when it showed up, so it got confused. Kuya realized that the series of actions of the ranker became his strategy to lure out the invisible Calamity. He showed himself and attacked the Calamity. This was possible not only because of Mugen's power, but all his efforts over the years which he thought were pointless. But not, it bore fruit. Meanwhile, Sasaragi was still relaxing on the bench. But then, he opened his eyes when he felt something was wrong. At the same time, Kuya closed in to declare a checkmate. Suddenly, his power stopped. He was shocked. His body suddenly refused to move. Inside him, Mugen grinned widely. He declared that the skill Infinite Awakening had been forcibly stopped. A countdown timer appeared before Kuya, stating that the skill would remain locked for 120 seconds. Kuya's body stopped moving. Mugen remarked that the skill apparently had usage restrictions. It made sense when Kuya used it often. The timer continued counting down until restart. Sasaragi lay on the bench and wondered if Kuya had already run out of skills. He muttered that Kuya was a complete idiot. Meanwhile, the goblin was confused. It inspected him, and started mocking him by showing its butt to him while he couldn't move. Then, it had thought of an evil plan. Kuya was confused when purple mist swirled around him. Massive clawed arms emerged from the darkness as the creature transformed into a gigantic, horned demon. Kuya froze in shock. The Calamity slammed him into the ground and crushed him beneath overwhelming purple energy. Kuya cried out. The Calamity began concentrating its energy. Kuya knew this was really bad. He saw the timer, and it still wasn't ready. He desperately wished it would go faster. Suddenly, Sasaragi rushed toward him while calling him brat. However, even he realized he would not reach Kuya in time. The Calamity fired a massive blast of purple energy directly at Kuya. The attack struck him head-on. Kuya collapsed motionless in a pool of blood. The red screen continued to display his skill as an Infinite Awakening. But it changed to blue, and the skill showed a dash instead. The Calamity menacingly loomed over Kuya's body. From a distance, even Sasaragi was left stunned. But something caught his attention. Suddenly, a brilliant blue light burst from Kuya's body and shot into the sky. Blue energy completely enveloped him as a massive aura surged upward. Sasaragi wondered if it was some sort of recovery or restoration. At first, he suspected it was another Calamity ability. But nope, this is entirely different. Kuya suddenly gasped and woke up. He was panting heavily. Sasaragi stared at him in disbelief and asked what was that. That's when Kuya finally noticed him. Kuya thought it was his imagination that the attack went through him. Sasaragi realized that Kuya himself did not notice what had just happened. Just as he expected, Kuya might actually be amazing. Kuya immediately warned him that the Calamity could manipulate fog. Sasaragi simply asked whether he locked his house. Kuya was so confused, but he continued to remind him not to forget to lock up. Then, a glowing key materialized in Sasaragi's hand. As he activated his skill, Lock! A massive seal with a giant keyhole instantly stopped the Calamity. He then lectured that forgetting to lock things would eventually ruin Kuya. Kuya was confused when he saw the Calamity had stopped. Sasaragi casually explained that he had locked its movements and that it would not move until the lock was released. Then, he told Kuya to finish the rest himself. Kuya could not believe Sasaragi had stopped it so easily. Sasaragi asked him how he figured out how to take the Calamity out of the fog. He wondered if he got the idea on the spur of the moment or if someone suggested it. He explained that he had spent years studying the numbers because he once wanted to become one himself. That said, he researched past calamities and how to defeat them, and for this calamity, he copied the strategy used by a ranker who once fought a slime calamity. The ranker sacrificed himself and defeated the calamity. Kuya was moved by that action. Sasaragi recalled the slime calamity from years ago. That ranker was him. Back then, he had sealed it using lock and declared that he would never allow calamities to do as they pleased. He was just humanity's corporate slave, but he was determined to defeat it. Back then, our boy Sasaragi was passionate, not anything like his current self. The memory faded as a shadow cast on Sasaragi's face. Koya noticed his expression. Sasaragi clicked his tongue and complained that Koya was troublesome. Eventually, the black fog disappeared as soon as the calamity was stopped. Sasaragi agreed and noted that the trapped rankers could now be saved, but they were up for another surprise. Multiple gates began opening around them. Koya panicked. Sasaragi noticed they were all advanced-level gates. He finally understood what the fog had been hiding the entire time. He also observed how it was intelligently planned. Kuya asked him what they should do. The countdown was just below 5 seconds. In no time, several calamities had passed through the gate. Kuya screamed in terror. He knew they can't deal with those many advanced ones. There will be so much damage if one of those gets out. Sasaragi groaned. He complained again about how troublesome it was. Another glowing key appeared in his hand. and an explosion happened. Kuya could only stare in shock. Golden energy wrapped around Sasaragi, and a massive magic circle formed behind him. He activated his technique. Phosphorus flames shedding armor Sword King. Sasaragi muttered that it was so troublesome. Then he told Kuya not to blink and that he should watch carefully. Kuya focused intently. Kuya called out to Sasaragi. He wondered what kind of technique it was. Sasaragi stood holding a massive key-like weapon, surrounded by a huge magic circle. He explained that it was Keelan flames that removed armor. This was the awakened form of his skill. Kuya had never heard of a skill awakening before. He realized that such a transformation was impossible with ordinary skills. He concluded that Sasaragi had truly transcended humanity. Suddenly, he noticed something coming from the side. A massive, insect-like calamity suddenly lunged toward Sasaragi. Kuya shouted for him to look out. When this calamity came close, the golden energy instantly incinerated it. The monster crumbled into ashes mid-air. Kuya realized how intense it was that a low-level calamity can't maintain its body. It reminded him of the time when he faced Mugen. Mugen had watched and estimated Sasaragi to be at level 5. Then, he immediately corrected himself and realized that Sasaragi was closer to a level 10 calamity. Mugen observed that Sasaragi's combat power had risen drastically. Sasaragi observed, as a horde of calamities suddenly appeared before him. Kuya got worried for Sasaragi since there were so many. Then, Sasaragi activated Royal Key Lock. Massive glowing keyholes appeared over the calamities and sealed their movements. After that, Sasaragi unleashed another technique called bumping, which made a massive explosion tore through the battlefield. Kuya was left stunned. Sasaragi looked cool standing there as the explosions happened. He turned his gaze to Kuya. Kuya realized it was a perfect and complete elimination. Even advanced calamities were powerless before Sasaragi. He realized the true power of Sasaragi, who belonged in the numbers. Suddenly, Sasaragi groaned and expressed that he's exhausted. He laid on the ground as he complained that he did not want to do anything and wanted a helicopter to take him home so he could sleep. Kuya told him not to sleep on the ground since he's an adult. Then, Kuya excitedly bombarded him with questions about the technique and the idea of stripping armor from skills. He had never seen or heard of anything like it before. He wondered if he could use it too. Sasaragi bluntly told him there was no chance. He warned Kuya not to underestimate the numbers. Kuya was taken aback. It was not something Kuya should know yet. Kuya was confused. He dismissed the topic. Then, he suddenly screamed dramatically and claimed his muscle strain, appendicitis, and hemorrhoids had all flared up at once. Kuya deadpanned that Sasaragi barely moved during the fight. He sighed at the man's terrible acting. Sasaragi simply lay there as he internally wondered if it was okay to show Kuya the advanced technique. Just a little flashback. In his previous conversation with Inui, he expressed his refusal. He questioned whether Inui truly intended to drag Kuya into their world. Inui replied that Kuya probably wanted to be part of it. Sasaragi argued that Kuya would not want it if he knew everything. Amused, Inui pointed out how rare it was for someone as lazy as Sasaragi to be so persistent. Given that Sasaragi was reluctant, he offered him a deal. If Sasaragi agreed to do it, he could take an entire week off. Sasaragi glared at him for playing dirty. Inui suggested that his daughter will be happy. He had information of her in his phone, so he knew that they had been living apart. He told Sasaragi that this is for humanity's future. With a heavy sigh, Sasaragi reluctantly agreed. Back in the present, Sasaragi lazily told Kuya that even if he learned the truth now, it would still take him another 10 years to understand it. He advised Kuya to give up. Instead, Kuya declared that he would work as hard as possible. Sasaragi called him stupid and warned him not to overdo it. Kuya promised to work hard as he had to become stronger. He admitted that becoming strong still felt impossible for someone like him, and yet now he could fight the calamity when he was just a useless Hachiko who never awakened any skills. Sasaragi observed him, and pointed out that Kuya did possess skills. Kuya was left confused. While they were conversing, several black crows gathered nearby. They were positioned above those two, and watched them intensely. Elsewhere, Kurusu called out to Inui, and reported that everything had gone according to his plan. Inui confirmed that Kuya truly possessed skills. He still doesn't know what. Kurusu noted that Inui seemed unusually happy. However, he expressed that showing Kuya an advanced skill was still too early. when the numbers even hid it from the government, let alone the public. He warned that if their plan ever became public, the balance of the world would collapse like opening Pandora's box. Inui chuckled and agreed that they must never become Prometheus, the one who gave fire to humanity, but he pointed out that a human capable of absorbing calamities had finally appeared once again, which meant that the time froze since that day, had finally begun moving forward. He claimed that because of Kuya, they could finally move forward at the Numbers Association. Sasaragi groaned loudly while complaining about why he needed to go too. Kuya pointed out that it was a given that they had to report how the mission went. He yelled at him to stop complaining when he's laying in a cart as Kuya pushed him through the hallway. Sasaragi expressed that he couldn't do anything after his menacing armor release left his entire body out of commission and sore. Kuya doubted if he was telling the truth. Sasaragi grumbled that Inui should have been the one coming to thank him. He complained about that bastard, but Kuya told him it's enough since they're already at Inui's room. The door opened to reveal Kei Kusanagi. Kuya froze in shock as Kei stared at him coldly. Sasaragi casually asked if Kei's suspension had ended already. As Kei walked past Kuya, he declared that he had not lost. Sasaragi commented that he's a real handful. He warned Kuya to be careful since the kid had taken a liking to him. Kuya realized he's right since the guy attacked him out of nowhere. Kuya hated him. A voice from inside then invited them to enter. Kuya brightened when he saw Inui. Inui told them they did well on the mission. Standing beside him was a blonde woman in a lab coat. Kuya instantly recognized her. She was Jaime Kijoin of the Numbers 8. Kijoin identified him as Kuya Kamakami. Out of the blue, she licked his cheek. Of course. Our boy blushed and stumbled backward while screaming, "What?" He was embarrassed that she licked him. She smiled and told him he reeked of calamity energy. Inui asked her to examine Kuya's skill. Kuya realized she was analyzing him. Kijoin ordered Kuya to show his status screen. After seeing that the characteristics of the skill was in that notation, she understood why idiots mistake it for being useless. She clarified that the dash did not mean there was no skill, but it meant minus. Seeing how confused Kuya was, she knew the conversation wasn't going anywhere with an idiot like him. Kuya repeated the word in confusion. She rephrased it by calling it cancellation instead. She explained that Kuya possessed the ability to minus the power of skills and calamities and return them to 0. Suddenly, she slapped Kuya across the face to demonstrate that it does not work on everything and it had to be activated. Inui suggested that there's a condition to activate it. It could be when Kuya took a lot of damage or if in the verge of death, but what he's certain of is that this skill was suppressing the calamity inside Kuya. Kuya couldn't believe it. He remembered being bullied in the past for not having any skill. He was treated like an errand boy and was even nicknamed Hachiko. And now, he learned that he has skill all along. This made him emotional. He cried. But the moment was interrupted when Kijoin told them she disliked speculation and suggested dissecting him immediately to investigate further. Kuya reacted in horror at the mention of dissecting. Suddenly, a human leg emerged from Haim's mouth. They watched as more parts of the body came out. When she was done, she wiped her mouth and expressed that she created a perfect one. It was a clone of Kuya. Kuya couldn't fathom that he came out of her mouth. He panicked as he couldn't understand the situation. Plus, the clone was naked, so he felt embarrassed. Kijoin realized that Inui didn't tell the boy. She revealed that her skill was called duplication. By using her tongue, she could read a living being's information and create a perfect replica. She explained that while the clone was not alive, its body was completely identical to Kuya's, allowing them to study him through it. Sasaragi remarked that her skill was disgusting. Kijoin teased him by saying that his dissection brings back a lot of fond memories. She suggested doing it again. Sasaragi turned pale. He begged her not to make him remember as it was torturous watching his own body get cut to pieces. He warned Kuya that it was not fun to watch. Kijoin announced that she would begin dissecting Kuya at once. Unexpectedly, the clone suddenly grabbed her by the throat. Everyone froze in shock. The clone warned her not to touch it so casually. Kuya saw Mugen in it. Kijoin glared at it. Using a scalpel, she took the clone's arm and remarked that the doll was surprisingly lively. Amused, she commented that things had finally become exciting. Kuya felt bad for his arm. She dragged the naked clone out of the room by its hair, casually stating that she would report back after learning more. Kuya bitterly watched. Inui explained that she was normally far too important to personally examine an ordinary rancor. He stated that this proved how much he expected from Kuya. Then he declared that Kuya was the one who would end the war against the Calamities, and that he believed Kuya was humanity's hope. Kuya remembered Inui calling him that before. Inui then went on to explain that humanity awakened because calamities appeared in the world. He stated that humans and calamities were two sides of the same coin. Because Kuya possessed both, he had the potential to transcend them entirely. However, Inui warned that Kuya's power remained incomplete and unrefined. He explained that this was why he had Sasaragi show him the armor release technique earlier. Inui clarified that majestic armor release was a secret art only permitted to the numbers. Because of that, Kuya needed to rise through the ranks quickly. He stated that ranks were determined through levels, skill proficiency, and mission record. After defeating 2 high-class calamities, Kuya had already risen from unranked to low rank. However, the road ahead was long and steep. Kuya had no choice but to continue training and climbing higher. Suddenly, the entire room shook violently. An overwhelming pressure filled the area. Kuya immediately broke into a cold sweat as he felt an aura far beyond anything he had ever experienced. He wondered if it was Mugen's. Inui wondered if the special grade calamity from 6 years ago had returned. Kuya realized he was talking about Mugen. Inui explained that the public believed he defeated the calamity back then, but in truth it vanished before the subjugation ended. He admitted that he never learned whether it returned to its world or simply hid somewhere else. Hearing this, Kuya nervously prepared to confess that Mugen was actually inside him. But before he could speak, Inui coldly stated that the creature destroyed the world and took away the person he loved. He swore he would kill it the next time they met. Kuya froze in shock from the killing intent. Mugen chuckled and told him that he doesn't mind if he snitches. He challenged Kuya to do it. Suddenly, a messenger burst into the room and reported that a special grade gate had appeared. The detected pressure was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. They believed it to be a new special calamity. The counter showed approximately 1 year before the calamity came out. Inui realized that it was a new one, and it will be there in a year. Sasaragi sighed and complained that this was becoming another massive pain in the ass. Inui expected Kuya to hear all of that. He stated that humanity only had 1 year left before disaster arrived. He expects Kuya to know what to do. Kuya was determined. He declared that he would become one of the numbers. 1 year passed in Tokyo, and only 1 week remained before the special grade gate opened. People went through their daily lives. One man remembered when the special grade calamity from 6 years ago had turned everything into a wasteland. He feared Tokyo would suffer the same fate if they failed to escape in time. Suddenly, there was a calamity warning. Then, a dark purple gate opened directly in the middle of the street. A massive serpent-like calamity emerged with a deafening screech. The crowd panicked and begged for help. Suddenly, bright orange energy descended from above. A powerful strike slammed into the calamity and crushed it instantly. The calamity was completely destroyed. The man thanked him and cautiously asked for his name. Kuya smiled casually and replied that he was nobody important. He was glad that they're safe. Suddenly, Sasaragi shouted at him not to leave them behind and complained about who would pull his cart. Kuya immediately snapped at him for constantly making other people drag him around. Sasaragi told him they should hurry to the Numbers Association since Inui was waiting for them. Kuya replied yes. It had already been 1 year since he last saw Inui. At Inui's office, Shizuka apologized and informed Kuya that Inui was not there. Surprised, Kuya explained that Inui himself had summoned him. She clarified that Inui was waiting somewhere else and asked him to follow her. As they walked downstairs, Shizuka thanked Kuya for his hard work during the past year. She mentioned hearing that he fought calamities in America alongside Sasaragi. Kuya explained that America lacked an organization like the Numbers. So many awakened individuals worked independently as bounty hunters. He admitted that dealing with both eccentric heroes and calamities made it the hardest year of his life. Shizuka noticed that his hair had grown much longer. Embarrassed, Kuya admitted he simply never had time to cut it. She observed that both his appearance and physique had changed so much that he barely looked like the same person from a year ago. Massive doors opened. It was an underground training facility. She explained that the Numbers and their candidates used it for training. Kuya noticed someone. It was Inui, and he excitedly announced that he had finally returned after a year of training. Inui noted that Kuya was now rank 12, a level close to the Numbers themselves. However, he stated that it was now a matter of whether he had the strength to back it up. Suddenly, he suggested a match. He wanted to see if Koya could land a hit on him. He encouraged our MC to use his full power. Inui was holding the Judgment Sword, the weapon used to destroy calamities. Koya was aware that one hit would not let him get away unscathed. He realized Inui was completely serious. Instead of being scared, Koya felt excited, because it meant Inui truly acknowledged him. He inhaled deeply and shouted that he was grateful. At that same moment, our boy's hair changed color again to bright red. He was just like a Super Saiyan. He rushed forward at incredible speed and vanished from sight. Inui focused. He sensed Koya's punch and evaded it. Koya's fist was wrapped in energy. Inui witnessed the power of Calamity. Koya continuously tried to lunge him, but he evaded it all. Inui pointed out that Kuya had infinite awakening from the Calamity's power and minus for cancellation. He was curious on how he would use those opposing powers. He was excited to see Kuya's strength. Kuya activated minus. His hair turned back to normal again. Then, bright blue energy crackled around him. Kuya launched himself forward and collided head-on with Inui's golden energy. Inui was surprised. Kuya looked serious. He lunged at him mid-air. Inui realized Kuya could switch between his own skill and the Calamity's power with no lag. He also noticed that Kuya had gained perfect control over the Calamity's destructive energy and could concentrate it in one point. Inui admitted that even he could not take the attack head-on unharmed. Kuya extended his hand and activated minus. That power was a bluff. Kuya was about to punch him instead, but he was surprised. The sword was gone. Then countless glowing blades flowed above him. Inui smirked and asked how he planned to handle that. Kuya's brows furrowed. Energy gathered around his legs. Using explosive force, he launched himself through the air and avoided the barrage while counterattacking at the same time. Suddenly, a blade pierced into his body. Inui appeared behind him and pointed out that his back had been completely open. Kuya apologized, because he intentionally left it open. Then, Kuya unleashed a powerful kick directly into Inui. The impact sent Inui crashing backward. Kuya became confident, but he saw Inui was still standing. He had his shield up. Then he told Koya that the shield didn't make it in time, and he was scratched on the hand. He praised him for that strike. Kuya's eyes widened, and he rejoiced that he managed to do it. Inui observed that Kuya had not only mastered his own skill, but had also made the Calamity's power completely his own. Kuya explained that during training, the Calamity inside him eventually stopped trying to take over. Its power had begun to feel like a natural part of his body. He admitted he did not know whether it had simply given up. Inui remembered Kajoin's report. He came to her lab and saw the replica of the boy. She told him he could have it if he wanted to, but he refused. He asked what she learned, and she told him that the thing was no longer human. It was a calamity. Back in the present, Koya nervously asked if something was wrong. Inui replied that it was nothing. He thought to himself that he was worrying over nothing. Inui expressed that he was curious about what the calamity inside him looked like, but our MC remembered the killing intent that Inui released when he was talking about Mugen. Naturally, because of that, Kuya could never reveal the truth. Changing the subject, Inui reminded Kuya that the special grade gate would open in 1 week. He also pointed out that Kuya's mission was still incomplete. Kuya knew that it was because he still needed to become one of the numbers. Inui explained that he would now teach both candidates the secret art known as refined armor release, which was required to join the numbers. As Inui walked away, Koya suddenly paused at the mention of both. Then Kei Kusanagi appeared behind him and asked if Kuya was the other candidate. Kuya jumped back in surprise. Inui introduced Kei as rank 11 and Kuya as rank 12. He explained that the numbers only had 10 members. With Teo gone, 1 seat remained empty. Inui declared that Kauya and Kei would fight for that single position. Those two had their guards up. Kei stared at Kauya sharply. Tensions quickly flared. They both declared that they would become the next member of the numbers. Alright, that's it for today's story. If you want the weekly chapter updates for this series, those will now be uploaded on my second channel, Manhwa Updater. So if you don't want to miss what happens next, make sure to check it out and join the update gang. Thanks for watching, stay cool, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.